Yeah, because most, and it's not just collaboration, it's even consolidation. So there are various aspects of consolidation of aviation in Africa. So most airlines in Africa are government owned, so they have to have sign-offs from their governments. Okay, and it needs to be from a policy point of view that African airlines should collaborate more. In fact, consolidate more. So if they are private entities, that would be easy. It's a merger and acquisition kind of thing. But now here we are dealing with state-owned entities which need sign-off by governments. So governments have not yet authorized, or they've not bought into this whole idea of collaboration. And that's what we're trying to do, to sensitize African governments that this is actually beneficial, not just for their specific airline, but for Africa collectively.
Okay, now let's talk about interconnectedness. You talked about that also as an issue.
Yes. Yeah. So currently we are 16% interconnected. So we're talking about intra-Africa traffic. This should improve to at least 50%, because in Asia they're at about 45%, between 45 and 50%. In Europe they're at 70% connected. So how do you do that? You do that by more flights. And if you can connect using land, you also do rail and you do road. But as you know, in Kenya, in Africa rather, we have deficiencies when it comes to alternative means of connectivity. So the fastest, best way to connect Africa is through aviation. And the best way to do that is to increase scale. In other words, to have bigger airlines or more connected airlines or more collaborative airlines. Okay, and that needs to be done quickly. So today we have 2% of global air traffic. And Africa as a continent is 18% of the world's population. So therefore, there's a gap of 16%. So we're not even saying we should go to 16%. We're saying we should move from 2% to something more respectable. Let's say 10%. That way you'll see a marked difference when it comes to connectivity. You can fly directly to any African city if you have a 10% global traffic. You will see that the cost of travel within Africa will drop significantly because of scale. And you see that there's going to be an increase of trade, there's going to be an increase in tourism, African tourism. And obviously the ripple effect will be that the economies will improve, there will be more activity, economic activity, and it's all good for everybody.
What is the cause? I mean, what is the problem? Is it the infrastructure? What is the problem?
So in my reading, infrastructure, but that's not the main cause. The root cause is Africa has not identified aviation as a key strategic economic pillar for the economic development. So Africa, apart from just a few African countries, then they go for other things. And I'm not saying they're wrong. So for example, they focus on agriculture, they focus on tourism with exclusion of aviation, and many other things. But the good thing with aviation, it is an aggregator. So if you think about employment, education, if you think about logistics, if you think about agriculture because of export of agricultural goods, trade because of trade of commodities, if you think about tourism because we bring in tourism, all those things are integrated in aviation. So by growing aviation, you actually, by extension, are supporting all other sectors of economic development. But that's not the way we've done it in Africa. In other words, what we've done is we've focused on the primary sources of economic development. But my argument is, why don't you look at the catalyst? And then by extension, it will help other sources. And it's been, if you look at other countries, think about Dubai, for example. One of the reasons Dubai is what it is today is because it has a very flourishing aviation sector. Qatar, same thing. Singapore, Korea, name all those countries that we all admire and say that they are a high growth rate. It's because they have identified aviation as key and central to economic development. That's what we should do in Africa as well. So the point that I was making is because when you talk about sustainability, this is a very broad term. But inevitably people think about environmental sustainability. Environmental sustainability or climate action is critical and it's important. It's part of our sustainable development goals that have been laid out by the United Nations. So that we should focus on. And that's why you keep hearing people talking about SAF and other measures so that we can make sure that we are decarbonizing the environment, reducing the emissions. environment. That's important. What I'm saying is that should not be looked at in isolation, because sustainability involves many aspects of life. So, for example, how do we make sure that people in Africa have enough to eat, for instance? That's what sustainability is all about, social sustainability. Or, for example, how do you make sure companies in Africa are economically sustainable for the long haul? In other words, they can year on year continue living so that they can employ more people for purposes of making sure we reduce unemployment, we reduce poverty, and we reduce dependability. So sustainability should be looked at in a broader perspective, not just environmental, because all these things are interconnected. The danger that we have is that because the other aspects of sustainability have more or less been dealt with in other parts of the world, of course, therefore, that is the main discussion point, which is environmental sustainability. In Africa, we're still grappling with these other elements. So when we talk, we should try and integrate them so that it makes more sense to have a discussion around environmental sustainability, economic and social, all at the same time. Europe is doing what is best for Europe. So we have our destiny in our own hands. We have to decide what is good for Africa. Okay? They don't impose things for us. So, for example, their mandate is that if you're flying to Europe, you have to blend 2% of your fossil fuels with SAF. Okay? I mean, that's what they want. Okay? So we have to decide what is good for us as Africa. Okay? So, for example, they have made a decision that for them to be more sustainable as airlines, they need to come together. They need to collaborate and even consolidate. So if you look at European airlines, they are huge because they've come together. Air France, KLM is now one group. And those separately they are big enough, but now they've come together. That tells you something. It tells you they are thinking about their future and sustainability of their airlines. In Africa, we've done exactly the opposite. We have small little airlines popping up everywhere. They're not sustainable because in aviation you have to have scale. Yeah, if you have few aircraft, 30 aircraft, 50 aircraft, that's a small airline. You need to be big, and not just because it's sustainable, but because we have a mandate as African Airlines to connect Africa to Africa and Africa to the world. Now, if you are small, then you are not connecting. So we should be able, from Kenya, to fly to any point in Africa. But the only way to do that is to have scale. So that's the argument, is that let's do what is good for Africa. Europe will do what is good for Europe. But if you don't do what's good for Africa, they'll impose. I say let's urgently, as Africa, let's collaborate more. And in my field, I would say in aviation, let's work better together and urgently, and stop unnecessary competition.